We didn't deserve Bioshock Infinite. It's a carefully crafted game loaded with stunning visuals, beautiful music, and an incredibly immersive story. When was the last time you listened to a quartet in a video game? I'm about to break down exactly what sets Bioshock Infinite apart as a thought-provoking, intelligent, and vastly creative game. Bioshock Infinite is one of the most visually stunning games to ever exist, even so many years later. Everything from the lighting, the colors, the time that went into researching this time period, and the feeling of being in this world come together to create a breathtakingly beautiful experience for the player. We're taken through Columbia, the city in the sky full of wonders, new technologies, and a new culture. You would expect the occasional visual hiccup for such an ambitious concept, but Irrational Games really outdid themselves in terms of visual quality. Whether it's the path leading to Booker's baptism at the start of the game, or your first experience on the skyline, it all feels so immersive and awe-inspiring, especially the first time around.
Whoa!
The way they combined history, culture, religious imagery, and new technologies spark a level of curiosity and wonder in the player that make for a very memorable experience. Bioshock Infinite has some of the most intentional use of music I've ever witnessed in gaming. It has a certain elegance to it. Without directly saying it, Bioshock Infinite shows you it has a particular affinity to the arts. In the scene where Elizabeth opens a tear to the future, we hear this. We clearly recognize this from around our time period, but Booker and Elizabeth mention how they've never heard anything like this. Something familiar to us that is completely foreign to the characters makes for a curious dynamic in our heads as the viewer. I love when creatives take the extra step to play with the medium and break the fourth wall a little bit. The greatest example of intentional use of music is where Booker and Elizabeth have a jam session. Booker starts playing the guitar as Elizabeth begins singing a lovely tune.
Will the circle be unbroken by and by?
It's intoxicatingly natural and was designed to be this way. As we can see in the ending credits, Ken Levine, creative director and lead writer for Bioshock Infinite, was seen telling Troy Baker and Courtney Draper, the lead voice actors, that they're doing an incredibly professional job, but he wants them to sort of find each other's tempo in order to create a more natural feel identical to that of a real jam session. This attention to detail shines throughout Bioshock Infinite. It's moments like these that achieve true and lasting world building. This game wasn't some corporate cash grab or the churning of a repetitive formula in gaming. Ken Levine, along with many other hardworking creatives, poured their life and soul into Bioshock Infinite, and it shows.
There's a better home waiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky.
Bioshock Infinite is critically acclaimed for its storytelling. It has a thoughtful, meaningful, and deeply complex story that envelops you as you keep learning more. The game begins with us riding a boat during a thunderstorm on the coast of Maine. We listen to an odd conversation loaded with cryptic foreshadowing. We're shown that we need to bring back this girl unharmed, but don't know why. The dialogue here is shrouded in ambiguity, but is so delightfully satisfying once you're familiar with the plot. We enter a lighthouse tower, and as we make our way to the top, the desolation and loneliness begin to creep in. At the top, we find 3 bells to ring in a specific order, causing the sky to turn a deep red color accompanied by bellowing sounds. The door opens, and inside we find a seat we assume is some sort of destination. As we take a seat, it forcibly straps us in. Our weapon gets dropped during liftoff, making us feel vulnerable in the process. These elements of suspense, along with the voice telling us ascension is about to begin, are genius, as they make us feel very uneasy yet eager. We're launched into the clouds higher and higher until we're greeted to one of the most gorgeous scenes in video game history.
15,000 feet. Hallelujah.
Irrational Games proved that Bioshock 1's opening wasn't just a one-off. They were able to create an incredible opening sequence that immerses you deep into a unique landscape yet again, just like the iconic bathysphere ride in Bioshock 1. You proceed forward into a lovely, almost too perfect area, which is an atmosphere I've never really experienced before in gaming, at least not like this. In order to advance, the game forces you to take a baptism. The illusion of choice and being cleansed with water are two tremendously important themes throughout the story. The opening of this game really sets up the player for what Bioshock Infinite is at its core, a prominent example of great storytelling and execution. The next segments of the game are dedicated completely to world building and showing you the depth of culture in Colombia. From kinetoscopes to a quartet to the games at the fair, Irrational Games dedicated a great deal of effort into fleshing out a unique setting. To go as far as a quartet was really the cherry on top for me that got me invested in learning more about Colombia. The first voxophone we hear is from Comstock and is a wonderful use of foreshadowing.
One man goes into the waters of baptism, a different man comes out, born again.
The sequence with the Lutece twins is brilliant. We're once again put into a forced choice, and your actual sense of choice is basically mocked by these characters throughout the game. It's easy to brush off the twins as crazy at first when they bet on your choice of heads or tails, but once you see the backside of a sign, with heads having unanimously won every time, it makes you stop and think for a second and wonder if there's something deeper going on here. When we arrive at the raffle, we're introduced to the old school prejudices of Colombia and start uncovering what really lies beneath the picture-perfect surface. Despite being told not to pick number 77 in a telegraph, it's the exact number we're given, thus furthering a recurring theme of fate and determinism. We're given a choice to either throw the ball at an interracial couple, as the crowd demands, or at the announcer, but it's not really a choice, just the illusion of choice, as our action gets interrupted regardless. After several battles, we learn that Zachary Comstock is the proclaimed divine ruler of Colombia. We learn that he's a prophet who can see the future. He tells Booker that he is aware of his presence, and that he knows Booker seeks to repay his debt by bringing back the girl. He refers to the cities on the ground as the Sodom below, which really paints the picture of the religious ideologies of Colombia. So much time and effort was put into developing Elizabeth's character. In order to get to her, we have to pass through labs and research centers, showing us that the girl being kept is much more dangerous than we think. Her movement is tracked, and whoever keeps her locked away is able to see which room she's in at any point in time. We first see her through a one-way mirror, our first impression of her being one of imprisonment. It's here we start to see the theme of a bird trapped in a cage. We can see she's creative, inquisitive, and oh yeah, she can open portals to other worlds. Every time she does it though, something life-threatening happens, almost as if the universe is fighting it. When Booker finds her, she is initially frightened and then in disbelief as if she's never seen another person before. She reaches out to touch us and we notice her right pinky finger is missing. We're then introduced to Songbird, who's responsible for keeping Elizabeth secured. As Booker and Elizabeth make their way out of the tower, Elizabeth discovers that she's been watched and kept isolated her entire life. Understandably, she becomes distraught as Songbird becomes more and more aggressive. We get thrown off from the top of the tower only to barely survive by landing on the skyline. Songbird takes down the skyline and we land in the water below. We narrowly escape Songbird's grasp since he can't stay submerged in water. We wake up on an artificial beach and go search for Elizabeth after she joyfully wanders off. We find her dancing on the pier and Booker convinces her to come with him by saying he'll take her to Paris.
I don't understand. How could we get there?
That's where that airship's going, but if you want to stay and dance, we can...
No, let's go. Come on, let's go. Come on, let's go right now.
Sometime after, Booker reveals he was hired to bring her to someone in exchange for his debts. Through the numerous interactions between Booker and Elizabeth, we learn much more about them. Booker is a man who has a dark, violent past, and he's unapologetic in believing that he's beyond saving. Elizabeth is a stark contrast to this, being vehemently against harming others, at least at first. Booker and Elizabeth are able to secure an airship, but Elizabeth notices that Booker set the course of the airship for New York instead of Paris. She becomes irate and knocks Booker unconscious.
Hey, will you just turn around and talk to me, and we can...
From here, the bulk of the game involves piecing together the truth of the city. A faction known as the Vox Populi has risen to combat the prejudice and injustices in Colombia. This of course comes with many fetch quests, and for me is where the game starts to lose some of its initial luster. It's a long escort mission with many pit stops and deviations along the way. About halfway into the game, we need to find the gunsmith Chen Lin in order to make a deal with the Vox Populi to get our airship back. We find Chen Lin's lifeless body, and it's suggested by the Lutece twins that death is a matter of perspective. It's here that Elizabeth feels compelled to open a tear to a world where Chen Lin is still alive and go through it. We're given the choice to jump in, but of course, it has to happen anyways. In doing so, we start to see an unsettling truth. Elizabeth's power isn't some hunky-dory wish fulfillment. It's an act that comes with severe consequences. We begin to see the effects of jumping through the worlds, as soldiers Booker has already fought are incoherent and appear to be in great pain. Elizabeth tells us it's because they remember being dead. They're not meant to be here. From here, Elizabeth and Booker contemplate the morality of jumping through tears into other worlds. Elizabeth is eventually taken and forcibly indoctrinated by Comstock through implants, becoming the tyrant ruler of Columbia. Elizabeth goes on to purge the world below with fire, calling it baptism, just as Comstock had predicted. We eventually come to find out she was fighting this internally the entire time. In her old age, she used all her remaining strength to summon Booker from another world, so she could give her past self advice, something to make sure this reality never comes to exist. Notice the harsh contrast between this dark dystopian world in comparison to the warm, calming world we've seen so far. There's something about Bioshock Infinite's themes of time and alternate realities that make me feel very grateful for my current situation. The epitome of Bioshock Infinite, hands down, is its ending. We finally confront Comstock with Elizabeth by our side. This is the man responsible for Elizabeth's suffering along with the destruction of the world in countless realities. Comstock knows his end is near, but right before accepting his fate, he plants a seed in Elizabeth's head. He tells her to ask Booker what happened to her finger. Enraged and confused, Booker takes matters into his own hands and ends Comstock's life by drowning him in the water, despite Elizabeth pleading him to stop. Elizabeth asks Booker about her missing finger, and Booker says he doesn't know, as blood leaks from his nose. It's as if he has conflicting memories at this point. We continue on and Elizabeth concludes that the advice from her future self is actually song notes to control Songbird. They command Songbird to destroy the tower, which includes a technology that's been siphoning Elizabeth's powers up to this point.
The Whistler! Elizabeth!
There is an immediate shift in her demeanor, as she is able to see through multiple universes all at once. She transports us to Rapture, the city from Bioshock 1, in order to finally put Songbird to rest. We witness a somber goodbye as he slowly lets go.
It's okay. It's alright. I'm here. Just let go. There you go. There you go.
Getting to see Rapture here is a much appreciated blast from the past. We continue on as Elizabeth begins to refer to these different settings as doorways. As we move forward, she begins speaking about constants and variables, as if it's all making sense to her now. We see different versions of ourselves walking perpendicular to us as Elizabeth says, "We swim in different oceans but land on the same shore." She begins speaking deterministically and that every possible choice in life has already been made, and regardless of what we know, everything will happen all the same. We open a door leading to a baptism. Booker recalls being here. We're asked if we want to take the baptism, but Elizabeth tells us we already did. In order to advance, we must agree, but Booker backs out of it at the last second, claiming nothing could wash away the things he's done. We were given a choice when our choice never really mattered. Bioshock Infinite uses the mechanics of video games artistically to once again demonstrate this recurring theme, the illusion of choice.
Father, make him
Stop
born
it.
again, Lord.
Stop it!
What are you doing to it?
Get off me! Get off!
Son!
You didn't go through with it.
Think a dunk in the river's gonna change the things I've done?
There's a shift in the power dynamic. Booker is no longer the leader and Elizabeth the follower. Booker becomes the follower. Elizabeth becomes more and more condescending as the ending draws closer.
We find Comstock.
Comstock's dead!
No. He was here.
We're taken to a room familiar to Booker. There's a baby in a crib and Booker starts piecing it all together. Despite him denying it, this was where he exchanged his daughter to repay his debt. He says he would never do such a thing, but Elizabeth tells us we don't leave this room until we do, as if showing awareness to video games as a medium. Once again, we're given the illusion of choice.
The debt's paid. Mr. Comstock washes you of all your sins.
We're guided to the site of us giving our daughter away to Comstock. We fight to grab a hold of the little girl, but just as the other Booker gets away with the girl, the tear closes, cutting off the little girl's finger. It's here that the wheels start churning in the viewer's head as the story comes full circle. Anna, Booker's daughter, is actually Elizabeth who he gave to Comstock. Her powers came from existing in two physical universes at once. To cope with the pain of having lost his wife from childbirth and having given his daughter away, Booker grieved for 20 years, drinking and gambling his life away. So much so that he accrued immense debt to very dangerous people. He was then made an offer, a chance for redemption. This was from Robert and Rosalind Lutece, the quirky twins we've been seeing all along. They were ordered by Comstock to make the offer for the girl. Booker begins to come to terms with his past, acknowledging he did sell Elizabeth. His solution is to stop Comstock before any of this was ever able to happen. He says he'll smother Comstock in his crib to prevent all of this. Elizabeth asks him if he's sure that's what he wants, and he reassures her that it's the only way to make up for what he did to her. We open the door to the baptism once again, but this time it's different. Booker is once again asked if he wants to take on the baptism, as alternate versions of Elizabeth begin to appear. They tell us that in some realities we refused the baptism, but in others we went through with it and changed our name. Same constants, but different variables. The different Elizabeths tell us that in order to stop the problem, we have to make sure it's never able to happen in the first place. They start saying Comstock must be smothered in his crib. One Elizabeth pulls us and says we're Zachary Comstock. Another pulls us and says we're Booker DeWitt. Booker says no, I'm both, as he gets dunked in the water for the last time. Somber and joyless piano music plays as both Booker and Comstock breathe their last breath. One by one, each Elizabeth begins to vanish, with the very last one being the Elizabeth we spent the entire game with. We're then met with a black screen and the ending credits, leaving us to put together and process what just happened. The ending of Bioshock Infinite, although it has its holes, is one that makes you think about life, think about potential, think about time, and its effects, not just on us but the world, and possibly many worlds. In order to avoid the destruction of mankind and the prolonged suffering of both Booker and Elizabeth, they had to find the constant in the universes that led to those outcomes. This common thread was the baptism. They had to stop Comstock before he was ever born. When Booker takes on the baptism, he changes his name to Comstock, and the events of the game unfold. Since Elizabeth is actually Anna, Booker's daughter, his death means that she would never have existed either. Booker and Elizabeth decided that in order to make the world a better place, they must disappear. I want to emphasize how powerful that is. Both of them decided that in order to achieve the greater good, they both must cease to exist. This ending is one of the most thoughtful, intelligent, powerful, and painful scenes in gaming history, all at once. Bioshock Infinite's ending tackles two very uncomfortable but extremely important topics: the fact that we're all capable of evil, and whether or not the people that have done horrendous things are worthy of redemption. After listening to a lovely quartet and seeing the main voice actors have a marvelous jam session, we're met with one last scene. Booker's in his room again, and this time it seems different. Booker opens the door and the last words we hear are, "Anna, is that you?" This suggests that somewhere there is at least one Booker to be reunited with his daughter. This scene is a lovely touch, but I'm not quite sure how accurate this is in terms of multiverse theory and what the logistics are of going back in time and ending yourself to avoid diverging timelines. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm curious. Bioshock Infinite delighted us back in 2013 and still does to this day. There is a certain timelessness to it and how they were able to capture a different time period and culture inside of a story that makes you stop and think about life itself. Through indisputable prowess in game design, writing, and music curation, Bioshock Infinite has cemented itself in my heart and in gaming history as one of the most gorgeous, thought-provoking, and creative games in existence. Bioshock Infinite is at the core of what creativity in video games should be. What are your favorite aspects of Bioshock Infinite? What would you say are its weaknesses? I enjoy reading your comments and I'll make sure to reply back when I can. Thanks for your support and I'll catch you in the next one.